My stepmother thought she could freeze me out of my father's legacy and leave me with nothing. She spent a decade weaving a web of lies to steal our estate, but she forgot one thing: science doesn't lie. These DNA results just proved she was never family. And now I'm taking everything back before we dive into this story. If you love real stories about betrayal, justice, and people fighting back against those who wronged them, hit that subscribe button right now, because on this channel, we post a brand new revenge story every single day. My name is Rachel Hendricks, and what I'm about to tell you changed my entire life. My father, Robert Hendricks, built his fortune from nothing. He started with a small hardware store in Ohio and turned it into a chain of 12 stores across 3 states. He worked 18-hour days for 30 years. I watched him sacrifice birthdays, holidays, and his own health to build something he could leave behind for his children. When my mother passed away from cancer, I was only 19. My father was devastated. 3 years later, he met a woman named Diane Whitfield at a charity gala. She was charming, well-dressed, and always had the right thing to say. I wanted to be happy for him. I really did, but something about Diane never sat right with me. She asked too many questions about his finances. She pushed him to update his will within the first year of their marriage. She slowly pushed me and my younger brother, Tyler, out of family decisions, out of holiday dinners, and eventually, out of my father's life almost entirely. Have you ever felt like a stranger was slowly replacing your own family? That's exactly what happened to us. Looking back now, I can see all the small warning signs I ignored at the time. The way Diane would change the subject whenever Tyler brought up our mother. The way she rearranged the house within months of moving in, packing away photo albums and old furniture like she was erasing 25 years of our family history. I told myself I was being paranoid. That grief was making me suspicious of a woman who simply made my father happy again. I wanted so badly to believe that, because the alternative was too painful to face. My father passed away 4 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was only 61. The grief was unbearable, but what came next was even worse. When the will was read, Tyler and I discovered that Diane had somehow become the sole beneficiary of everything. The stores, the properties, the investment accounts, all of it. $68 million gone to a woman who had only been in our lives for 6 years. We were told there was nothing we could do. The will was legally binding, signed and notarized. Diane sat across from us at that lawyer's office wearing sunglasses indoors, barely hiding her satisfaction. She told us, and I quote, "Your father wanted his money to go to people who actually loved him." I will never forget those words as long as I live. For 3 years, Tyler and I struggled. I was working 2 jobs just to pay rent on a small apartment while Diane moved into a mansion in Naples, Florida, driving a new Bentley, posting vacation photos from Europe. Meanwhile, I couldn't even afford to visit my father's grave without taking time off work I couldn't spare. Do you know what it feels like to watch someone live in luxury off of what should have been your inheritance, while you can barely make ends meet? I remember calling my father's old business partner, a man named Frank who had known him for 30 years, just to hear stories about him. Frank told me my father used to say that Tyler and I were the only reason he got out of bed after Mom died. Hearing that made the unfairness of everything even harder to swallow. How could a man who loved his children that much leave them with almost nothing? There were nights during those 3 years when I genuinely thought about giving up. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, wondering if my father would even recognize the life I was living. Tyler moved back in with me for a while after he lost his job, and we would talk late into the night about whether we should just accept what happened and move forward. But something in me refused to let it go. I owed it to my father to find out the truth, even if I didn't yet know what that truth would look like. Everything changed last spring when my Aunt Carol, my father's older sister, passed away. While cleaning out her house, I found an old shoebox filled with letters and photographs. Buried underneath everything was a folded piece of paper, a private investigator's report from nearly 15 years earlier. My father had hired this investigator right before he met Diane, back when he was researching a completely different woman he had been dating casually. The report mentioned a name I didn't recognize, Diane Marsh. I did some digging online, and it turned out Diane Whitfield wasn't her real name at all. Before marrying my father, she had been married twice before, both times to wealthy older men who died under strange circumstances, both times inheriting significant portions of their estates, and both times using a slightly different last name. Diane Marsh, Diane Kowalski, Diane Whitfield. Same woman, 3 identities. My hands were shaking as I read through everything. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Alvarez who specialized in estate fraud. She told me that suspicion alone wasn't enough. We needed hard evidence. That's when she suggested something I hadn't even considered. She asked if my father had any biological children with Diane. He didn't. But Diane had a son from a previous marriage named Marcus, whom my father had never legally adopted. Yet Diane had somehow listed Marcus as a joint heir on several trust documents, claiming my father considered him a son. Patricia filed a motion requesting DNA verification on several documents that required biological confirmation for certain trust distributions tied to Marcus's inheritance claims. Diane fought it in court for months, using every delay tactic her lawyers could find. Why do you think someone would fight so hard against a simple test if they truly had nothing to hide? Finally, the judge ordered the testing. When the results came back, everything unraveled. Marcus was not related to my father in any way, which we already suspected, but the deeper investigation triggered by the court order uncovered something far bigger. Forensic accountants examining the trust documents discovered that Diane had forged my father's signature on the final version of his will, the one drafted just 2 weeks before he died. The real will, the one my father actually signed years earlier, split the estate evenly between Tyler and me, with only a modest allowance for Diane. I remember sitting in Patricia's office when she called to tell me. I couldn't speak. I just cried, right there in her waiting room, while other clients stared at me. For years of struggling, of feeling like I had lost my father twice, once to death and once to betrayal, and finally, I had proof. The case went to criminal court. Diane was charged with forgery, fraud, and other financial exploitation. During the trial, it came out that she had done this exact thing to her 2 previous husbands as well, using forged documents and manipulated relationships to drain their estates before their families could catch on. My father was her 3rd victim, but because Tyler and I refused to give up, he became the one case where she finally got caught. Diane was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The court reversed the fraudulent will and restored the original one. Tyler and I finally received what our father always intended for us. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours from the very beginning? I want to tell you honestly, the money never brought my father back, and it never erased those for painful years. But it did bring something else, something I didn't expect. It brought closure. It brought the truth out into the light. It proved that my father loved us exactly the way I always remembered. And that no matter how long someone hides behind lies, the truth eventually finds its way out today. Tyler and I run the family business together, just the way our father dreamed. We opened a scholarship fund in his name for first-generation college students studying business, something he always wished he could have done when he was young and broke, building his very first store with nothing but determination and a small loan from his own father last month. We handed the very first scholarship check to a young woman named Sophia, who reminded me so much of myself at that age, determined but scared, unsure if hard work alone would ever be enough. Watching her cry with relief made every single hard year worth it. My father's name is on that check, and in a way, his legacy is finally exactly what it should have always been. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that patience and persistence matter more than anything. I could have given up after that first day in the lawyer's office when Diane smiled at us like she had already won. Instead, I held on to the truth. even when I had no proof, even when everyone told me it was hopeless. And in the end, that truth became the very thing that saved us. If you're going through something similar right now, if someone in your life is trying to take what's rightfully yours, I want you to know that persistence pays off. Keep digging. Keep asking questions. Keep believing that the truth matters, because eventually, it always comes out. What would you have done if you were in my position? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to subscribe, because we share a brand new true story just like this one every single day, right here on this channel. Thank you for listening to my story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never stop fighting for the truth.